So tonight we have Dr. Rebeca Quiñonez-Piñón. Her husband grew up in Kirkwood, so that's why they are visiting. She's been a university professor. She is a researcher, and in 2013 she became the executive director of Forests for Monarchs in Mexico. So, please help me welcome Dr. Rebeca Quiñonez-Piñón.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for being here. It is a very short notice, so I'm really grateful that you are taking the time to come and listen to the presentation. And to listen and learn about our program in Mexico. That's good. And I gave the same presentation yesterday at the Missouri Botanical Garden, and I was telling them that I have a lot to thank to Missouri. My husband was born here, and then well, I started learning that my extended family was very kind and really nice and everything. I thought that it was my extended family, but after this visit, I'm learning that it is actually the people from Missouri. Everyone is so kind, so nice, very good natured. So I'm very lucky. I'm very lucky to be part now of this program and have this opportunity to be here. I've been working for this organization for 1 year. And this is my first presentation in college, so I'm getting there. The last year was mostly administration and trying to learn more about the program and what they are doing, so I felt ready to come and do this year. So Missouri is the first state that I visit. Well, the program is called Forests for Monarchs. The actual name of the organization is La Cruz Habitat Protection Project. If you hear this name, it's really hard to understand what the organization does. The name of the organization was an idea of the board of directors 17 years ago when they started the program. And the nursery of where we grow the trees is located in an extremely old hacienda in the state of Michoacan, which is called La Cruz. La Cruz, that's the name of the hacienda. So that's why we have that name. So what we decided to do is to make it easier for people to understand what we're doing is call our program Forests for Monarchs. So please, if you don't hear me in the back, let me know because I'm not a very loud speaker. Is it okay? Okay, sorry. Okay, so tonight I'm trying to cover these topics. I'm a great believer in short presentations because sometimes people get bored, and when I start seeing people like not enough or sleeping, then I know that it's time to just keep quiet. So I'm just going to try to make it short, nice, and easy for you. And then we can just go through questions if you want me to go in detail on some things. I'm going to speak about the Oyamel forest and why monarch butterflies love to go to Mexico, find the Oyamel forest, and pass the winter time in that area. Where the deforestation causes in Mexico, especially in the Michoacan area, where the effects of this deforestation in the monarch area, explain about my program strategy, and how do we do it, and finally, what's the assessment of our program at this point. So, let's see. Let's start knowing where the Oyamel forest is. The Oyamel is a fir tree. The scientific name is Abies religiosa. And we have very small patches of these trees in Mexico. As you can see, it's the black box, and we can find it in south central Mexico. South of Mexico is a very small patch, and two very small patches in the northwest. And this is exactly where the monarchs go. What are the characteristics of the Oyamel forest? Well, these are the normal or the suitable characteristics for the Oyamel forest to settle, to survive. Besides the high altitudes. They love to be in high altitudes, and normally you will find the Oyamel forest above the 3,000 meters. So these are the results of a study that was done, which they were running a climate change model, and they were trying to see under which conditions the Oyamel forest will survive. The results of this study were showing that in about 30 years, the Oyamel forest will have to start finding higher and higher altitudes in order to survive due to the climate change. Well, we have seen this map many, many times, and they draw it in a very different way. Still, there's a lot to learn about the pathways that the monarchs follow to reach Mexico, and the pathways that they follow to go back to US and Canada. But this is what you will normally see. Some people just draw straight lines from here all the way here, and then because they don't really know what's happening here. So there's still a lot to learn about this pathway. So the Monarch Butterfly Biosphere Reserve is about 56,000 hectares. It is located in two different states in Mexico, the state of Michoacan and the state of Mexico. And the largest area of the core zone of the reserve is found in the south of the whole area. And a smaller area is found in the north. So besides that, there is a buffer zone. Besides that, it was extended in 2000. This area was decreed in, there's a decree, a federal decree from 1986, and there is a second decree from 2000. The names of the areas are Chingua, and there is a big sanctuary that you can visit if you go to Mexico. I don't know, have you ever been to the sanctuary? Well, so maybe you were in Chingua in Rosario, right? No. Well, in the Monarch Butterfly Biosphere Reserve, anyone? No? Okay. Yeah, but
Your husband.
yeah, doesn't count. He doesn't count. That's cheating. No, but well, could you please explain your experience going down there? No, I'm just joking. Actually, he had his first date at the Monarch Butterfly Biosphere Reserve.
After waiting for 14 years.
Anyways, so there are two main sanctuaries in Michoacan. One of them is called El Rosario, and the other sanctuary is called Chingua. These are the two main sites that you can go and visit and look the monarchs winter in those areas. Of course, the areas and the colonies extend to other sites, but the sites that are open to the public are these two. And so this is why we're talking about this area. Besides, this is the name of the communal area, the communal land. That's why it is identified with that name. Well, researchers and people from the research have counted about 22 colonies, and the numbers vary throughout the years. They normally count 12 in total. For the last 3-4 years, they were counting less than 12 colonies. And this year, it seems like they counted, again, 12 colonies. However, the size of the colonies was very small, and as most of you might know, the total area occupied by the colonies was less than 1 hectare, which is quite concerning.
What is it normally?
What, the size of the colonies?
Yeah, what has it been in the past?
It varies throughout the years, but what we know is that from this year to past year, it has decreased in more than 90%.
Oh.
So it's just quite severe.
Did you say 90%?
90%. Yes.
Wasn't it like 44 acres in the 90s? I think in the 90s.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah,
There's
more
not-
than 10 hectares.
Yes.
That'd be 20.
So to understand what's happening with the deforestation in Mexico, I'm just trying to explain it with this graph. These are results from 2013, and what we see is that a really large amount of the wood harvested in Mexico are pine trees. And also that the amount of oyamel used is about 4.3%. That's what we're going to focus on. And what I found in other reports is that, for instance, in 2003, the amount of pine trees that were harvested, it was about 81%, and the amount of oyamel was about 3%. So we can see that between 2003 and 2013, the amount of pine trees that were harvested has decreased, and that the amount of oyamel that it's being used has increased. So my theory here is that because of the lack of pine trees, now they are looking for the oyamel, and that's something that we could prove in the Monarch Butterfly Reserve. How do we use the wood? So most of the wood that is harvested is used for us to create building materials. And there is a good portion of the wood that is used as energy wood. These are reports from the, how do you call it, the Secretary of Environment and Natural Resources in Mexico. And in the same report, they are indicating that they know that their estimates for the energy wood is not what they were expecting. They are thinking, and they know that there is more than that is being used for energy wood. What we learned throughout our local participants is that is true, that about 50% of our local participants are saying that they use the wood as an energy wood. And that doesn't mean that they just use it for that. The same person can say that they use it as energy wood and also to create building materials. But this is very interesting that we found this number. And I think our number is closer to what FAO is reporting. And Semermat admits that FAO has a better estimate of this use. So this is what sometimes you will witness when you go to the Monarch Butterfly Biosphere Reserve. You see small families with 2 or 3 horses carrying several wood pieces. And well, the main problem is that they need it. They need it for cooking their food, to keep their houses warm, and sometimes to create small pieces of art that they can just sell to the tourists. And unfortunately, they don't have that wood available anymore in the surrounding areas of the Monarch Butterfly Biosphere Reserve. The use of wood in houses, we have estimated that it's between 35 and 50 cubic meters per year per family. And also we think that that is about 100,000 pine and oyamel trees, and of about 25 years of age. But this is estimated that the pine trees are quite large. What we also know is that normally families are not able to harvest large trees. They don't have the tools, so they go for the young trees. So our estimate is kind of conservative. So if we talk about smaller trees, we're talking about more trees that people are taking. This study was done in 2000. Dr. Brower and his collaborators did this multi-temporal study with some satellite images to estimate the vegetation cover in the area. What they found, sadly, is that between 1971 and 1999, the forest cover inside of the Biosphere Reserve decreased by 44%. So even with the federal decree of the area being a Biosphere Reserve, there was still some deforestation or wood harvesting happening inside of the reserve. The red dots are monarch colonies. So as you can see, even in this area, which is one of the main areas where the monarchs go in winter, there was a severe deforestation happening. So, well, of course, the green implies forest, yellow is degraded areas, and gray is development land. So what are the problems with the deforestation? There is something created that is called fragmentation. And when fragmentation happens, bare land starts just like surrounding some small islands of forest. So these small islands start just getting isolated from the rest of the ecosystem, and they somehow are able to keep the same ecosystem dynamics inside of the island. But in the surrounding areas, they have to change somehow. So when this happens, some other things start changing inside of the ecosystem, inside of the island. It takes some years, but it happens. So in this case, one of the fragmentation problems is that the colonies start becoming smaller and smaller. And maybe they disperse. It doesn't mean that at the end we get the same number of monarch butterflies that leave US, plus minus, the ones that they stay on the road or the path. But what I'm trying to say is that the colonies can gather as many as butterflies as we were expecting, and they have to start dispersing to other islands where they can find the suitable environment. And with the creation of these islands, throughout the ages, the animals inside of these islands start being more exposed to other predators. And what happened is that, so predators have more access to their food, in this case the monarchs. This is something that you can see quite often there, and I think it's increasing. I was there in February, and I saw a lot of monarchs in this way. There are some birds that catch the monarchs. They just eat part of the body, and they just leave them there. And then the monarchs start just crawling on the ground or just trying to find a way where they can just go. It's really sad. And then 24 hours later, the monarch dies. So it's really sad. It's part of nature. It has to happen. Some of them have to go and feed some predators. But the problem here is that because the monarchs are more exposed, then this is happening more and more often. The other problem is that the canopy cover and other vegetation is lost. This picture, I don't know if you are familiar with that picture, is from 1976. This very nice lady, Catalina, is sitting there surrounded by monarchs. And I've seen other pictures from the 70s where people are just standing in the same area, and the area is surrounded by vegetation. And the same area that you're seeing there, it looks like that now. So the other problems are at the level of the hydrology of the ecosystem, the area. So what happens? There's no vegetation, there's bare soil, so the solar radiation reflects more, creates more heat, and there is also an increment in the rates of evaporation and transpiration of trees, which means also less water to store in the watershed. And at the same time means less rivers, less springs, less creeks, and that's also something that is affecting the monarchs. So, and erosion. That's how the areas surrounding the monarch butterfly reserve look like now. So there's a very severe erosion happening because of the lack of trees. And of course, the other problem is that because there are no trees, there is no leaves or needles falling on the ground and creating a little layer of soil, and then creating organic matter that will be like mineral nutrients for other vegetation. So it's a vicious cycle what's happening here. And then when the monarchs go and look for creeks and other areas to drink water, there's nothing. It's thoroughly dry. So that's how it looks sometimes when they're looking for water. And what I've seen also, which is really sad, is that they just gather in places where the soil is soaked with water, but it's practically mud, and they're just trying to suck up the water from the mud. So, what's happening here? To us, this is a conflict between social issues, political issues, and environmental issues. In 1986, there was so much pressure for creating the monarch butterfly reserve, creating a place where the monarchs could go in winter. But at the same time, there was this conflict that there were people who were using the same resources to survive. And so the land was already owned by local people. The government decided to create this reserve, but still the local people did not use the land. It was still their land. So they call it like a communal land. They can use it, they have some restrictions, but still they have some rights to use it. So it's kind of weird because they still live there and they still believe that the land is theirs, but they sort of can use it, but no. So it's a serious issue. There are people who has to be fed, who has to eat. At the same time, we want to protect the forest that is not only a house for monarchs, but other endemic species. And of course, there is also the industry. Fortunately or unfortunately, the reserve area where the monarchs go is very close to Mexico City. Like in about 2 hours, you can just go to Mexico City. So it's the perfect place for industries to go harvest wood and then go back to Mexico and just make use of that wood. It's just perfect. It's the perfect site. So it's kind of complicated. It doesn't mean, to me, it doesn't mean that somebody is wrong. It's just that we need to know how we can handle the situation and try to give to the communal owners what they need, and at the same time try to protect this environment. So we're talking here about sustainability. I don't want to bother you with this, but this is the division of the communal land. The dark blue line is the buffer zone. The red line is the core zone of the biosphere reserve, and the light blue is the division of the communal lands. This study is the estimation of vegetation in the area. The red colors between yellowish and orange and red means highly or heavily vegetated. And the red, I would say that is practically forest. And if you go to the dark areas, we're talking about borderland. So, and this study was done in 2010. So after the second decree, which was done in 2000, we can still see that there is a severe deforestation happening inside of the reserve. And sometimes, as you can see, it is even worse inside of the core zone than it is at the edges of the zone. So what we're thinking is happening here is that there is some unsustainable harvest of the wood. So the reality is that the local demand is not going to go away. It's still there. So what we need to do is give them different ways to have a source of food and a source of income that they can use. I think that's the way that we need to go. And that's also what the program thinks. So our effective conservation strategy is to provide economically attractive alternatives to the local people. So somehow we can just divert their attention from the Monarch particular reserve and the resources that they can find in that area. How do we do it? Well, in general terms, we produce the trees, we distribute the trees, and we make sure that people get the technical support to know how to make those trees reach the ground and then let them grow. We produce the native trees of the area. We have a very, very detailed, I wouldn't say complicated, but it's a very detailed and very careful way to produce these trees. We try to make them high quality trees, so we will make sure that when they reach the ground, they will survive. So we start at the point that we collect the seeds. They're like local seeds from the healthiest trees that we can find in the area. We prepare the nursery, or the people who work down there or partner in Mexico prepares the nursery. And actually, to me, this is almost like preparing an operation room. They clean everything really well. They disinfect everything after the previous season. They try to make sure that there is no bacteria or viruses or any kind of infestations going around the nursery. So they will ensure that all the trees will survive. The seed collection is normally done by local people. Our partner in Mexico hires people, which is really good because at the same time we are creating jobs every year. everything is organic. We don't use fertilizers, we don't use pesticides, we don't use herbicides. And that's another way for us to ensure that our trees will survive. The germination of the seeds is also a totally very detail-oriented process that our partner in Mexico created over the years. He's using his own germination soil that he uses some worms and special soil and mold, and also he used some prickly dirt to make sure that the germination soil sticks to the seeds. So he really takes his time to do this. Once the seeds germinate, they are transferred to the copper blocks, the copper treated blocks, and then they let the seeds grow there. It takes a whole season, several months, to let the trees grow, make sure that they are healthy. They water the trees when it is needed. They make sure that they are not struggling with desiccation or the sun that they are getting is too much. So they have to make sure that they cover the nursery when it is necessary. So it's a daily work around the nursery. Once the trees are ready, the seedlings are ready, they're removed from the copper blocks and then packed very carefully so the root system won't be damaged. And they will tolerate the transportation, because that's the other problem. When the trees are transported to different sites, they kind of struggle with the heat of being in a truck and not having enough water. So we need to make sure that they are packed properly so they can tolerate the stress of being first removed from the copper blocks and then wrapped in certain plastic paper and put in boxes. So we need to make sure that they will tolerate that stress. So once they reach the areas, they distribute the trees, and they need to make sure that they contact the right people to deliver those trees. So as I was saying before, this is also including a social factor that we need to take into account. So we need to make sure that the people from the communities know about the program, and they really trust the people working down there, and that sometimes we even have to ask them if they are okay with us delivering trees to other neighbors. Because sometimes, especially with the situation in Michoacan, sometimes they don't trust everyone. And that's another of our challenges, which we are very grateful for that. Even the situation in Michoacan, we've been able to keep working until this point. So finally, we make sure that those seedlings reach the ground. Sometimes we have big reforestation campaigns. This is a site that was reforested a few years before, and then not a long time ago, they decided to plant more trees in the area. So the same people from the communities, they gather their neighbors, they gather the whole community, and they sometimes have these big parties where they spend 2-3 days planting trees. So these are our numbers. So we, this organization accrues with different partners, start planting trees in 1997. In 4 years, it's going to be 20 years. We're going to have a really good party. And then, our lowest number was almost a little bit more of 7,000 trees in 1997. The largest number of trees that we have distributed is 743,000. And in average, for the last 4 years, we've been delivering about 600,000 trees or seedlings. And we have a goal for this year, which is something that is really important for us. And I will talk about it later. the progress of our program. So in 2000, this organization was granted by, or had a grant from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And later, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service sent a couple of their employees to evaluate the progress of the program because they were funding them. And they were really pleased with the results. So in 2009, one of our big founders, they decided that they needed another evaluation, that they wanted to know how we were doing. This organization has been founding La Cruz for several years, and they really wanted to know how we were doing with the money, if we were just doing what we were supposed to do. So they had some sort of internal audit. They said they hired somebody to do this audit, and these are the results. So we have, by 2009, more than 4 million trees were planted. They estimated that about 1,800 hectares were reforested with those trees, that over 31 communal lands or ejidos. This is something I don't want to get into, but in Mexico there are two types of lands owned by the local people. One is called communal lands and one is called ejidos. Don't ask me what's the difference because I still do not understand. But what is inside of the reserve is called ejidos. We still call them like communal lands. About 900 individual reforestation and forest restoration sites were estimated. And according to some results, they are saying that more than 1,000 families were benefited by this program. So by 2013, 7 million seeds have been planted, almost. We're almost there. And so we're estimating that we had a really good work done between 2009 and 2013. More than 2 million trees were planted. One of the things that was seen with this evaluation is that in 2000, that's how some of the sites that were reforested looked like. And by 2009, when the evaluation was done, this is how the same site looks. So as you can see, it feels good to see the results. This is really good. So another result that they found with this evaluation is that the rate of growth of the trees is really fast, very fast. They found that in 10 years the trees were growing up to 50 meters, which is it is amazing. So it seems like the soil is helping, the environment per se is helping to grow those trees. And another benefit is that local people, they will start seeing that the land besides their land was being reforested, was seeing really good results, and they start getting interested in the program. So they start approaching us and asking for trees to do the same with their land. So this is another example of how the land looks. This is very interesting because this is, besides deforested, it's totally eroded. It's a very eroded area. Unfortunately, the trees are growing there, which is good because it means that it's going to protect the soil, and the soil per se is going to recover as well. Another sign is that we have seen that monarchs were avoiding some sites to overwinter. They were not creating colonies in these areas anymore, and we have seen that the colonies are going back. This is something that was noticed by 2009. I was speaking with some people from the reserve, and they were saying that there was another colony that didn't site for several years, and they found the colony this year in this area, which is great. It means that there's some good results happening in this work. Another interesting thing that we learned with this evaluation is that the carbon sequestration is the results or values are high. So we noticed that the tree survival as well is really high. Sometimes for some sites it was about 70%, which is I don't know if you're familiar with restoring forest, but the tree survival when we try to reforest an area tend to be less than 50%. In this case, we're getting numbers between 60 and 70%. Talking about the carbon sequestration, we found that in 5 sites that were reforested and they were between 9 and 10 years old, the estimates of carbon sequestration were between almost 38 and almost 98 metric tons of carbon per hectare. So that means that we are having very high rates. This is something that it is not normally seen in a reforested area. And so we were really pleased to see that even our reforested area was working so well in sequestering carbon. And the other thing that we noticed is that the plots with the higher density were not the plots with the higher carbon sequestration, which is quite interesting. So we learned also that it doesn't matter if we plant the trees too close together to make a thicker forest, that somehow this is going to help to sequester carbon. So that means that we can even plant trees that are a more longer distance between them, and that will help us to even reforest more area. I don't want to go through this one. So let's see. Let me just talk about this. And as I was saying, we have a goal for this year, and our goal is to plant 1 million trees. That's what we want to do. This is a very bold decision because we're a very small non-profit organization, and we don't know what's going to happen next year. So, but we think that this is a good decision. We're decided to take the risk and go for 1 million trees to distribute and plant this year. And the reason is because we see that the demand in the area is high, and we are hoping and expecting a really good response from the participants and or donors. That's what we want to do. So I think I'm going to stop here, and if you have more questions, we have a website. There's brochures that you can take with you, and but if you want to engage in a conversation or discussion, I hope just a conversation. We can just do it then. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
How many did you plant last year?
600,000 and yeah, about 600,000.
And how many different species of pines?
We have about 4 different species of pine. Let me see right here. And one fir, which is the Abies religiosa, the oyamel, that the monarchs use, and there is
Cupressus lindley,
yeah,
it's a
this,
cypress.
you see that's a cypress. Cupressus. So 1, 2, 3, 4 pines, as I said. Yeah, and all of them are native. All of them are native trees.
What's being done to change the behavior of the native people so that they're not continuing to cut trees?
Well, there is something that I didn't talk about is also we're educating, we're trying to planting the trees. We also visit the schools and give trees away to the schools. And the teachers already know the program, so every year they ask for trees and we go and talk to the kids. Well, when I'm saying we is the organization, but actually it's the department in Mexico who does that. They distribute the trees and they teach the kids every year the importance of taking care of the trees. One thing that we all have learned at this point is that it's easier to create conscience in a child than trying to do it with an adult. So we're just trying to start this point and just go that way. Yeah, there are several examples about it. And also with the families, the parents, we work showing the results of the program. They are seeing the results. They know that some other families besides their land are seeing the benefits. They're getting the economic benefit, and they are getting interested. And the other thing that we have seen is that the people per se is conscious of the problem. They are conscious of what's happening. They care for their environment. They try to protect the environment, and sometimes we are surprised by the answers that they give us, and how much they are concerned about what's happening. So it's just like they already, it's part of their culture, take care of the environment. But as I said, it's kind of, there is a conflict there. Because they care for the environment, but at the same time they say, I have to feed my family. So what can I do here? Or just give me one second. So you want to say something?
Yeah, just want to ask.
Sorry.
None of these are protected trees. They're not in a national forest. The trees, the forests aren't like in the United States. We have national forests, national parks. These are not in protected areas. That's question one. And then secondly, I went to a program, maybe some of you did too, at the county library, talked about population in the world, developing world. And this gentleman said that Mexican population is finally stabilizing, which impacts all our resources in the forest. Do you know anything about that? Do you
That the
believe
population is,
the overall population, he said, is not, I'm getting the feeling from you that the people are very concerned, they have to live, they have to eat, and a growing population makes it much tougher to protect trees and forests. What do you know about that?
about
The population impact on this forest and your trees.
Let me think about it. Population impact. You mean the growing of the population
Yes.
in the area?
Sure, there's people, yeah, exactly. More people, harder on resources.
Well, of course, yeah, it happens. Yeah, there's more people, they scatter on the resources, and as I said, they have to feed themselves. And another thing that we have noticed is that because of the economical problems that they are facing, sometimes even their kids are working in the land. And for instance, the peak season for them is during the wintering season when the monarchs arrive there, because that's when they take people to the peak of the mountains to visit the overwintering sites. And you can see kids of 6, 5 years old, 8 years old, taking people up there because they need to work. So for them, it's just, they don't go to school. They don't go to school. And hardly, last February, we took with us one of those kids. He was like 8 years old. He was 10, but he actually looked like an 8-year-old kid. And he couldn't read. He couldn't read at all. I mean, we had a brochure with us, and he actually couldn't read the brochure at all. So there's a lot of pressure because they still have their families are growing. They are still using the resources, and they don't have the education. So it's kind of hard, yeah. Give me 1 second because you wanted to say something, right?
Yeah, well, So Forest for Monarchs actually has two types of reforestation that they do. I was trying to answer your question. Part of it is reforesting within the reserve boundaries.
Yes.
Where there's been a forest fire, where pine bark beetles have killed trees, or where there's been illicit logging that's a little bit hard to control. So they're reforesting, and those trees are going to stay there. But a lot of what they're doing is also reforesting land that was cut in the past, often by these huge industrial timber baron type of operations, where the people in the ejidos got, jobs for a year or two, and then trees were gone. Following that, these very steep mountainsides were planted with corn or potatoes or beans, and you had maybe 5 or 10 years of production, and then the soil, as you saw in some of those pictures, is just eroded down to bare subsoil. And people are left with, absolutely valueless land. But one thing that's helped a great deal is the Mexican government now does have subsidies for people who want to convert land back to forest. So they can get this sort of social payment every year while their trees are growing. And then they can also, they have to apply for a permit, but they can get a permit to cut those trees. So now there are these important economic incentives to convert farmland or even totally eroded land back into forest. And the cycle would be about 25 to 30 years between planting and harvesting. So typically the trees are planted at a fairly close spacing, and then after about 5 years you would do your first thinning. And the first thinning you might get post wood, firewood, wood for making pallets. And then by the second thinning you might start to get more valuable timber and so forth. And then finally, after 25 or 30 years, you have trees with a diameter of, about like 18 inches. And then, people actually look at this as a long-term investment. Now, so you might think, well, where's the carbon sequestration value and all that? So it turns out that more carbon is stored in the soil than in vegetation and in the oceans, and I think in the atmosphere combined. It's pretty amazing. So, but when land is farmed, a lot of that soil carbon has been lost. So when you're converting it back into forest, the soil itself is storing a huge amount of carbon that's not lost when the trees are cut and then the land is replanted. So if you had a 25-year rotation, at any given moment, if you're thinking of an entire ecosystem, about 4% of that land area is being harvested and 96% is growing. And then that 4% is always moving to a new patch every year. So you have a system that's storing a huge amount of carbon. And but anyway, the idea of assisting these local poor communities to reforest land is to relieve pressure on the reserves, because you can tell them, look, this is a reserve, it's for monarchs, please keep out. But the poverty really is extreme, and if you're talking about being able to keep your children alive, they're going to do what they have to do. So they're providing alternatives.
Yeah, so that's how the strategy was, just as I was saying, diverting the attention from the local people from the reserve. So we can have these services. Yeah, that's true. I forgot to mention that. The incentive is that the government is supporting and giving some incentive to these people so they can't just convert their land again. If it was a crop or an agricultural land, then they can just convert it to forest again, and then they are paid for that. What's happening with the program is because as Chris was saying, sometimes you can see the results, the big good results after maybe 20 years, 25 years. We're still on our 17th year. However, our local partner has told us that some people are already getting the permit to start paying, and they are very excited about it. So it's another good thing of the program that other communities are learning about it, and they are getting interested about these results. And the opinion part, as I was saying, is something that we learned with this evaluation, that we can also separate the trees when we are planting, so we can just even cover more area to protect. Sorry, he had a question, and then we go here.
Some of my question has been answered, but who controls the thinning? I mean, if this is a communal area, it's almost a problem of commons.
Yeah.
A modernization that started under Salinas de Gortari is that they do allow privatization of parcels within the ejidos. So you still have to be an ejido member,
Yeah.
but it was like totally communally owned land, and nobody actually owned any part of it, and now they're allowing individuals to have their own little parcel.
The federal government controls the permits, and actually, even inside of the reserve, in the core zone, sometimes they are allowed to do some cleaning, especially of those trees that were infested by bark beetle. There's a big issue with bark beetle. I didn't talk about it as well. There was not much time to talk about all the issues. But there is also bark beetle, and some of the local people, or ejidatarios, we call them ejidatarios, were telling me this February that they were allowed, that the federal government allowed them to go inside of the core zone and clean that area because the trees were infested. I mean, and they have the right because it's their land. So they go, they mark the trees that are already practically dead, and they are allowed to do it. But everything is managed by the government. And there are some small associations in each community that help these local participants to do the procedure to ask for the permits. So there were questions here.
I don't know, people know, I mean, this became such a huge issue that when President Obama met with the President of Mexico and the Prime Minister of Canada, they agreed to form a commission to address this issue, because the monarchs, these little butterflies, I think it's like 50 of them together weigh an ounce, fly like 2,300 miles, or they go to the same place every year. It's just, it's just so astounding. So people, and in the United States, we have a huge problem also. So there's a deforestation in Mexico, but in the United States, when the monarch comes back to reproduce in the United States, and then there are several generations of monarchs that end up in the northern U.S. and in Canada, and then you get the super monarch that flies back to Mexico to overwinter. But those monarchs have lost a lot of their food supply, so they depend on milkweed in the U.S. to lay their eggs on, and then the caterpillars only eat milkweed to protect them from predators. And so as they're growing, and then they can, anyway, between that and the other native habitat to support them on the way back has been lost because of our use of pesticides and the industrialization of agriculture. So people are looking at it in every country on how to address this. And it's really interesting to me that you have a connection to St. Louis, because there's another butterfly expert named Gary Nabin, and his wife is from St. Louis. And so he is speaking at the zoo pollinator dinner and has spoken here. So it's really a convergence here.
And I've bought a lot of seeds from Native Seed Search that Gary Nabin started. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
See,
So people are being encouraged to plant milkweed in the United States everywhere. Yeah.
something that is happening, and I think it will be really interesting for for you all is that Missouri, the state of Missouri is very, very interested in being the first state on setting up the example in the whole U.S. about taking care of planting milkweed. And you know that the mayor has this program in the city, right, of creating these gardens, and they are giving away milkweed, and he is trying to reach, I don't know how many gardens they have planted at this point, but I've heard that his goal is to plant 250 more gardens. He's very excited about this initiative, and
How do you get the milkweed, or where do you get the seeds?
you can contact the people from the city. They know, or the Missouri Botanical Garden. They know better about it. Or
Contact where, I'm sorry, is there Missouri? The Missouri
The Missouri Botanical Garden or the city of St. Louis.
It's all being sponsored by Operation Brightside. And Operation Brightside is working with the city.
That's how Bob would carry it.
Yeah, well, Mayor Slay is trying to get 250 areas to coincide with the 250th anniversary of the city of St. Louis. And the thing is, you know, there are a lot of people that work for the garden. We all live in the city, and we're trying to get native gardens, trying to get the neighbors to, you know, get rid of their, you know, their gardens. Greenscape Garden has a program that if you go out there and you join the Missouri Prairie Foundation, they will give you a free monarch plant.
Or you get lots of nurseries.
A free milkweed.
Any nurseries that get very native plants, and you want to get the ones that are native to Missouri.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I have space and I would like to plant.
Yeah, you wanna make
Definitely
sure-
you can get the plants from them.
Or Midway for Monarchs
Yeah.
is a website that can also
And one thing that is very important here is what you were saying. We need not to lose this connection between what's happening here and what we are doing in Mexico. It's very important. Even like restoring the milkweed for the monarchs here and keep restoring the forest in Mexico so they can find a way where they can go in winter. So that's what we're doing here too. That's why I'm here. Because I'm trying to find this connection. I don't want this effort in the US and Canada just to be totally isolated from our effort in Mexico. And there was a letter, maybe a 20-page letter, I don't know how many pages were it, but it was written by a bunch of scientists and environmentalists, and they make sure that this letter was going to the President of the US, the President of Mexico, and the Prime Minister of Canada, and they were asking for help. And something really interesting, and which makes me somehow proud of it, is that they were saying, in Mexico, we're doing our work, we're trying to do our homework here. So what are you guys doing?
Yeah.
So that's really good, and I would really appreciate if you guys keep that in mind. Let's not lose that connection. I mean, let's work together. Let's work here and let's work in Mexico. So let's find that connection.
Having moved to the area, I really don't know what it's like, but
You should go. It's really good.
this is kind of like a two-part question. Is tourism an issue, and has there been any thought about, you know, like building a hotel here or there and providing people with, you know, an opportunity to make some money on this, and maybe artisan shops with the hotels and.
See, last year, we're very proud of having American Forests on board. They've been very good supporters of our program for several years by now. And they have told me that they're really proud of what we're doing, which is good. So a way in which they decided to celebrate this partnership was bringing up some of their donors to see what we are doing in Mexico. And I was really afraid of that. I was just very, very concerned about it. And my first task was to take one of their vice presidents down to Mexico. So I really struggled because I haven't been in Mexico before that for a while, and especially in Michoacan, and I was really concerned. We were trying to find the venues, the hotel, visiting the sites. We felt extremely safe. He told me, you know, I haven't felt that safe in years. And then when we took this group of donors, they felt super safe. We just visited one of the ladies who was part of this trip. She was the one who did me the favor to contact me with you all. And we visited last night, and she was telling me, I asked her again, do you feel safe? And she said, oh, totally, for sure. I was totally fine. So what happens is that when they talk about the violence in Michoacan, everyone pictures the whole state as the problem. But the main problem is happening at the edges of the state, especially in the coast, which is kind of far away from the overwintering sites. As I said, the overwintering sites are very close to Mexico City. It's the central Mexico. So we will hardly see problems. Now, another thing that we need to keep in mind, something that I say always, when we travel, there is always risk, no matter where you go. Always there is some level of risk. So we cannot ensure that the 99.9% that nothing will happen. But at least we know that it's the violence and the problems with the drug cartels is not as bad as they picture it in the news. That's how I feel about it.
I haven't seen the new movie, Mountain Monarchs, but I'm wondering, I think that would be a great help for that to publicize your work.
Oh.
I don't know if it does or not.
I don't know why we're not part of their this process. I don't even know who make the picture. I've been trying to contact them, and I'm still trying to.
It doesn't sound like they did publicize.
They have a website.
Yeah.
They have a website.
Yeah, and I've been trying to contact them through their website,
Really?
and
You can order it.
still.
It was
Yeah.
at the Science Center here for a long time.
Yeah, but the movie.
Who is they?
The people who produce the movie. It's mainly the story of the first person who tracked the monarchs from Canada.
Yeah,
to,
it's a
and
really
you
neat
see it.
movie.
It's
If you guys
beautiful.
have an opportunity to see it.
So much of the success of saving the monarchs is dependent upon people, the families that live there. And as I understand it, you're hiring them to plant these trees? Or are they volunteers?
Yes,
They're volunteers?
they are volunteers. We
Then
don't.
how do these families that need income, I understand if they can wait 25 years, but by then your child is starved to death or
Yes.
something. Things move very slowly. You've got to reduce maybe the family size. Has that happening? Has the idea of that come across to anybody? The children, yeah, they get enthusiastic about things.
Yeah.
But how are you really going to move it? How do you really move it ahead so that the people understand the connection between trees and erosion, and they could care less probably about carbon in the air. They've never taken chemistry and they don't understand that.
Well, I think you're talking mostly about educating people, and that takes time.
And do you have the resources, the people, the schools?
Yeah, the schools are there, and we try to target the schools. And as I was saying before, we go there and try to encourage the kids to understand what's happening, the importance of them taking care of the environment. But also, this is a huge task where the government is involved as well. And the government has been on board trying to protect this area, and actually the government per se is giving trees away. They do the same. And we cannot, if we hire people to plant the trees, then our program becomes more expensive. And that's something that we cannot actually afford. But what we are trying to do here is make some of the municipalities around to be engaged, so they themselves can take care of that task. So we give the trees away, we distribute the trees sometimes to the municipalities, and they do the job. And the other agreement, as far as I understand, is that our local partner says, okay, you who own this piece of land, I can give you that many trees, but you need to find the resources to plant your own trees. It's something that we have done with our program. There are some other organizations there who have done that with some other communities. They hire the communities even to have their own small nurseries. But unfortunately, I don't know why it doesn't work. I don't know why it doesn't work. We have seen these small nurseries just drifting away, not being taken care of, because somehow the people feel like once you start paying them, you have to keep paying them. And if you don't pay them more than or you don't have the resources to do it, they're like, okay, I'm not being paid, I'm not going to take care of the nursery. So even if they know that for them it's a benefit, the nursery, they let it die. And it is hard to understand why they do that.
Then you're saying the government is a major player.
Yes.
And what is their interest? Do they care about butterflies really, or are they interested in the timber or the tourism? Or what's the payoff for the government?
Yeah, I wouldn't, yeah, we need to ask the government. I wouldn't, yeah, maybe
All right.
he would like to say something about it.
One thing to keep in mind
Yeah,
is that the participants are asking for the trees.
yes,
And they'll ask La Cruz for trees, they'll ask the government for trees. So it's not that someone is going out and saying, hey, you need to plant trees. They're asking for the trees. They understand in their own way of thinking why this is valuable. So we did conduct an evaluation and we asked them, what motivates you to want to reforest this land? And certainly economic benefits are part of it. And remember that they can start thinning and receiving economic benefits after about 5 years. And roughly every 5 years you're cutting and thinning. So there is some, earnings to be made along the way. But many of the people expressed also another we didn't prompt them with answers. We let them tell us what motivated them, and then subsequently we categorized their answers into different categories. Concern about watersheds and water supplies was a very big answer. When you live in an area where it rains 4 or 5 months out of the year and the rest of the year it rarely rains, you become very aware that protecting watersheds is really important, because when sources of water dry up that hundreds of people rely on, I mean, you just can't, you have to abandon the land, you can't live there. I was surprised how many people actually had a sort of altruistic understanding that this was good for the environment and for everybody. And in no small measure, I think that's due to a Catholic priest in the area in Zitácuaro named Padre Angel, who is very, very active in helping people in his congregations understand the importance of taking care of the forests.
It is 8:20, So I'm going to draw this to a formal close, but Rebecca will stick around if there are more questions you'd like answered. Forests for Monarchs, their website accepts donations. Forests for Monarchs is a nonprofit,
Yes.
so donations keep going. So once again, thank you all for coming, and let's thank Rebecca.